The day is January 1st, 2008. THQ Studios had just released Avatar: The Burning Earth on October 16, 2007, just 371 days after releasing the first game. But they weren't done just yet. The world record for creating a game trilogy was up for grabs, and thus they were already in the process of developing the final installment. Just 362 days after releasing The Burning Earth, THQ Studios presented the third and final game in the trilogy, Avatar: Into the Inferno. 3 years, 3 games. Absolute mad lads. These releases just kind of confirm what I said in the intro of my Burning Earth video. THQ Studios clearly had a deadline for these releases to maximize the sales while the iron was still hot. All 3 of them released while the series was still going and was pretty much the series to watch worldwide. Releasing them while everybody still cared rather than several years later when people had moved on is the smart play when it comes to maximizing revenue. Now, while a single year seems like a rather short period of time to develop anything substantial, THQ Studios proved they were able to create a new and vastly improved product in a short period of time. Where Avatar: The Last Airbender lacked in many aspects of the game, I was a huge fan of everything new they tried in The Burning Earth, and even without my nostalgic feelings towards that game, I'd still say it's a fairly decent game. So even though I had never played Into the Inferno before making this video, I was confident the short development time wouldn't be an issue at all. Surely they tried to take everything they had learned from the first 2 games and give it their all to make the last entry in the trilogy the best and most outstanding one. Now, after finally playing this game front to back, I think the most fitting thing I can say is that they tried their very hardest at least. I know that doesn't really answer anything, but that sentence will somewhat make sense at the end of the video. I promise. Avatar: Into the Inferno starts off in the exact same way as The Burning Earth. The game goes like
Previously on Avatar.
And then proceeds to show a bunch of cutscenes that contain stuff that happened in the series but never actually happened in the previous games. I mean, it's whatever. I already complained about this in my Burning Earth video anyway. If this is what you need to do to tie the story together, then be my fucking guest, I guess. It just sucks that none of the games feel connected this way. None of the references in the intro make any sense. Playing this trilogy as someone that's never seen the series just has to be the most confusing experience. Either way, after basically watching short cutscenes of the cartoon in PlayStation 2 graphics, you wake up on a boat after being struck by Azula's lightning while in the Avatar trance. You make your way through some obstacles, reach the upper deck and fight off a Fire Nation boat, after which you somewhat follow Book 3's storyline. You see, this game revolves pretty much entirely around the Day of the Black Sun and defeating Fire Lord Ozai afterwards. You sneak into the arms factory to blow it up, attack the Fire Nation on the Day of the Black Sun, free Suki and Sokka's dad from Fire Nation jail and head into the Chamber of the Elements to talk with Avatar Roku before taking on Fire Lord Ozai. It doesn't follow the story as narrowly as The Burning Earth did, but it's close enough to actually feel like a proper build-up to fighting Fire Lord Ozai. If I'm being honest, I kind of wish they had stayed as close to the series as they did with The Burning Earth to really make it seem like you're playing the actual series in the form of a game, but at the very least I'm glad they included the most important events like the Fire Nation eclipse and an incredibly random pseudo-boss fight without any prior level or lore attached to it in Sparky Sparky Boom Man. The placement of this fight made no sense whatsoever and truly caught me by surprise, but not including that moment would have been a war crime to me, so I'll definitely take it. Story progression once again happens through in-game and pre-rendered cutscenes, but they're just really boring this time around. Yeah, they used the original voice actors to make you feel the whole Avatar vibe, but the cutscenes just show you blowing up a factory or an enemy character showing up. While this is perfectly fine and all, the other game's cutscenes included irony, witty jokes, stupid remarks, and that's what made them stand out to me as much as they did. As stupid as it might sound, these cutscenes are just a little too serious for me. There's just nothing interesting happening on screen. Every cutscene is just, "Hey, you did this, so as a result, the following will now happen." Listen, I understand that this is a nitpicking complaint, but that's just what happens when you've already played through 2 of these games and know how much better these really could have been. But hey, overall the cutscenes are sufficient enough and do actually transition the game from area to area relatively well. At the end of every chapter they show and tell you what's next, after which you get warped to this chapter select area where you're flying around on Appa, with the characters briefly addressing what the plan is for the next section of the game. Not only is this a rather creative way to transition the story from chapter to chapter, and does this hub area look pretty cool, the characters actually say some funny stuff at times.
Aang! Are you okay? No crispy edges?
He's fine, Sokka. Relax.
Then it's time to tell him the plan!
Why this is only the case in the hub world though, is the world's biggest mystery to me. Either way, where the game doesn't feel that Avatar in the cutscenes, it most certainly does in the gameplay. This game truly is the most Avatar game of the three. And with this I'm not even aiming at the good looking areas, I mean just look at how cool this Day of the Black Sun attack area looks. I'm more so aiming at being able to use the environment at any given time. Prior to playing this game, I didn't know this was exactly what I wanted from an Avatar game. The Last Airbender didn't really focus on the bending at all, and the Burning Earth only briefly touched upon the bending with the static 2-player QuickTime events. But this is what Avatar is. You see a statue, bend it. A puddle of water, bend it. A torch, bend it. Bending everything that has something to do with the 4 elements. It's literally what Avatar is supposed to be. Like, let's take this area for example. On first glance, it looks like a pretty basic area, just a mountainous area with a waterfall and some bamboo. But the concept of Avatar just transforms this into a really fun area. You can water the bushes by using this small stream of water, you can bend the earth in order to reach this platform, you can climb the waterfall by making ice platforms appear, and you can even use water to destroy the bamboo if Sokka's boomerang isn't Avatar enough for you. And while this is just a singular example, the rest of the game is exactly the same. Whether you're trying to solve puzzles or defeat a horde of enemies, bending is available everywhere at any given moment. It's just really fucking cool. That doesn't mean the mechanic is perfect though, the game was made in 362 days after all. In this particular area, there are a bunch of tree branches blocking your path, and you need to use fire to burn them. Zuko, a firebender, can literally spawn fire with his hands whenever he feels like it. I mean, you can clearly see the fire appear when I press the attack button. Zuko is literally punching the branches with his fire hands, but they can burn them down, because that's not how the game was designed. You have to use Aang to reach the elevated area and then grab the fire from the torch and do it that way. I get that's how the game was designed, you use the environment to overcome obstacles, but seeing Zuko fail to destroy a small branch does look a little silly. Other than that, the game is relatively similar to the Burning Earth at its core. Upon selecting a stage in the hub, you play through these set stages that have an intended beginning and end in line with the story, in which you can either switch between the 2 characters that are attached to that particular segment or play with another person. While making your way to the end of a chapter, you naturally visit several different areas and fight a bunch of enemies. But where this game really distinguishes itself is the sheer amount of puzzles. Instead of running through levels and brute forcing your way through hordes of enemies, this game actually makes you use your brain. I know, shocker. I truly am a puzzle kind of guy, and this more puzzle-oriented gameplay was right up my alley. And on top of that, the ideas presented here are just very fun and creative too. Like, there are just so many moments to pick from here. Doing timed events with water buckets, Simon Says with musical statues, using the 4 elements to bend them into the right order on a timer. I can probably talk about them separately for several minutes because they're just so enjoyable. But if I have to single out one of them to demonstrate that the developers actually put effort into these puzzles, it has to be the one where you're supposed to preserve fire until the very end. In this chapter, you're playing as Sokka and Zuko, and your goal is to free Sokka's dad and Suki from Fire Nation jail. At some point you then reach this elevator that contains 3 candles, torches, whatever you want to call them. In order to even have a shot at freeing the duo, you'll have to preserve the fire up until the very top of the building you're in so you can burn the door down. On your way up, the game then proceeds to throw numerous challenges your way to prevent you from getting the fire up there. It starts off with 3 rows of 2 fans and a gap in a different slot every row. Your goal here is to grab the fire and light the correct torch in time before reaching the next set of fans. Now while this was very fun to do, especially with the time pressure, the game then ups the difficulty a bit for the next set of fans. This time around, none of the fans contains a gap, but every row has one fan that doesn't have a protective border around it. So what the game wants you to do now is to not only move the fire into the right slot with Zuko, but to also switch to Sokka and jam the correct fan before the elevator reaches the next row. I found the timings for this to be very tight and I failed it a few times, bringing me all the way back to the start, but this was so much fun to do. After overcoming these obstacles, you then reach Suki and Sokka's dad's jail cell, which kind of functions as a checkpoint, after which there is one more puzzle left. You burn down this door, after which a box falls out from behind it, and your final challenge is to quickly steer the fire behind the box before reaching the unblockable row of fence. And yeah, once you overcome this obstacle, you finally reach the top of the building after a series of fun challenges. This is just one of the many examples of how much fun the puzzles in this game can really be. The puzzles aren't incredibly hard, I mean it's a kids game after all, but all of them actually required me to actually use my brain to figure them out, and there isn't a single one that I ended up disliking. They clearly put some thought into these puzzles and made sure pretty much all of them require bending in one way or another, which only enhances the experience. Your ability to manipulate the environment also plays a pivotal part in the game's monetary system. The developers decided to bring back the copper from the first game, but this time around there's a lot more of it to collect. Like, every area just has money hidden in every nook and cranny, and it's just begging to be destroyed. Pots, weapons, caskets, bushes, statues, explosive barrels, enemies, every single thing drops money in this game.
You'll have to do better than that!
The blind bandit wins again!
It truly does remind me of playing LEGO Star Wars on my PlayStation 2, where I just had the best time destroying everything in order to collect money for the True Jedi achievement. This game encourages you to destroy everything by doing something similar. At the end of the level you can unlock a new special in the form of more health or increased damage output if you manage to collect a certain amount of money. The game doesn't have any progress bar to show you how close you are to this goal, which kind of sucks since it made me collect way more than the required amount every time, but it was still a lot of fun to have something worthwhile to work towards. Besides, collecting more than the required amount isn't even necessarily a bad thing, since it just enables you to purchase these specials and other stuff at a faster pace. Aside from unlocking the specials by collecting a certain amount of money, you'll also have to purchase them from the shop. To do so, you can enter Ember Island from the hub. This island essentially functions as a hub inside of the hub, if that makes any sense. On this island there's a bunch of stuff to break to collect like 300 more copper to aid you in buying whatever you need at the shop, where you're able to buy the unlocked specials. This shop is owned by the schizophrenic dude from the series that's able to become a completely different person by changing heads, which is a nice little touch from the developers.
What would you like to buy?
In this shop you can buy a bunch of helpful upgrades to your health and strength and such throughout the game, with the last one being a bit of a joke. The final purchasable special is called
Total Invincibility,
with its price being just under 100,000 copper. Before finishing the game there is no fucking way you collect this much copper, even if you don't purchase any of the other upgrades. So this perk is essentially useless unless you cheat. But this was clearly meant as a meme, and as soon as I saw this appear in the shop, I couldn't do anything else but grin. Other than the specials, you can also purchase some additional bonus art at the shop, which is also unlocked by reaching a certain amount of money in whatever level. These can then be viewed by entering the gallery on the island. This game's gallery sadly isn't even close to being as cool as the one in the Burning Earth. This time around there's no music, no prototype characters and structures, no drawings of the game. There are just these low-res images of the game that are barely recognizable, which was kind of disappointing. I really liked seeing some of the behind-the-scenes stuff and the drawn scenes of the game in the Burning Earth. I truly would have loved to see them continue down that path. They made these images unlockable by finding these secret scrolls throughout the level, but although these were relatively well hidden and actually pretty fun to look for, the images themselves just never felt worth the hassle. The purchasable bonus art is actually pretty cool though. They're all images of the characters you meet throughout the game, and even though the images themselves don't look like anything special, I truly like what they've done with the inclusion of character descriptions. Every single one of these bonus arts contains a nice, playful description of the characters that's actually pretty fun to read. The descriptions don't really go in depth or anything, but they tell you a little more about their personality and their role in the story, which the gameplay itself doesn't really touch upon. I know it doesn't really add anything to the gameplay itself, but I enjoyed spending a few minutes on reading these. The final thing to mention on Ember Island is the cheat locker, where you can, as the name might suggest, enter cheat codes. There aren't very many codes for the game, but the 4 codes that do exist can be relatively useful if you're a lazy prick. You can unlock all chapters, concept art, purchasable items, and last but not least, max out your money. I mean, how else did you think I was able to purchase
Total invincibility
in this clip? I actually appreciate THQ Studios including a cheat section in each of the 3 games, since it just saves so much time. After beating the game you can just look at and or purchase everything you missed instantly, instead of having to grind it out. Recognizing how annoying grinding like that can really be is already worth my appreciation. But yeah, that's about all there is to say about the collectathon and the levels themselves, so that just leaves me with the combat section of the game. Even though Avatar revolves around the fight against the Fire Nation, and this game in particular revolves around its conclusion, the combat is probably my least favorite part of the levels. The fights are just very slow paced and aren't all that interesting compared to the rest of the game. No matter the character you're fighting with, the moves just feel super stiff. There aren't any cool combos or anything similar to the special scroll moves which I was such a huge fan of in the Burning Earth. You just press the same button over and over, with the only real variation being the attacks you do by jumping once and attacking, or doing a double jump and attacking once again. On top of that, the moves just feel incredibly slow compared to the other games. Every time you hit the attack button, it just feels like the character is attacking at like a third of the normal speed, even though the footage itself doesn't necessarily look like it. The fights then become even slower with the enemy's ability to defend against your attacks. Like, I understand the idea. Having the enemies defend adds additional difficulty, but the way they programmed this is just terrible. There are 2 things inherently wrong with this idea. The first problem I have with their defense is the fact that they're able to defend at all. Not a single character you play at is able to defend themselves. There literally isn't a single button mapped to any defensive move or anything. Hell, even the rolling move doesn't exist anymore. So why are they allowed to defend and I'm not? Secondly, and this is the more important reason why this defending annoys me as much as it does, they become fully invincible after. Like, okay, for the sake of adding difficulty, I'll accept the fact that non-benders can defend against me bending literal fire into their faces, but once they stop their defense, they literally become invincible while attacking. After defending against your hits, the character then executes a set attack attached to its class, and for some reason you can't do any damage to them while they're in the middle of executing said attack. No defense hit marker thingy shows while they're doing this like it does when they're in defense mode. It's just total invincibility compared with a powerful attack and your own inability to dodge because there just isn't a button for it. It's great. If you were thinking throughout the video, why is this guy double jump attacking all the time? This is the reason. While in double jump, you also become invincible for a brief period of time, and they fall down like bowling pins as a little bonus as well. It's sadly the only way to actively dodge their invincibility attacks. All of this just prevents the combat from being fun, when it really could have been a cool experience. The enemies are more diverse than they have ever been. There are a bunch of different enemy classes, and every individual class has more variety in their attacks than ever seen before. And on top of that, the developers try to encourage you to use actual bending as well in order to deal with these enemies. In pretty much every fight you got one or more elements at your disposal, whether that comes in the form of a puddle of water, a lantern you can boomerang down for some fire, or a bunch of rocks just laying on the floor. There usually is an element available to aid you in combat on top of spamming the attack button. This combat system really could have been the best of the trilogy, but the slow pacing and this ridiculous defense mechanic might have just made it the worst instead. And what probably bothers me the most is that I could have easily improved these fights by just implementing the rolling move or adding the specials from the Burning Earth. Instead of doing any of that, you get a button layout where multiple buttons do the exact same thing. R2 and X are both bound to jumping and L2 and square are both bound to attacking. It's like they just couldn't be asked to do anything with these buttons, and thus they just made them do the same thing instead to save time. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the fights inside of the levels, and sadly I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of the boss fights either. The boss fights in this game are a mixed bag of fights I really enjoy and really underwhelming ones on the other side of the spectrum. As per usual in these Avatar games, you'll be fighting main or side characters that are somewhat in line with the series. This time around, however, the fights aren't based on plowing your way through a big health bar, but more so in using the 4 elements to disrupt their attack patterns. You flip General Zhao's boat with a block of ice, you use airbending to smack down the Dai Li members, you use water to extinguish Azula's ring of fire. You get the point. I'm kind of on the fence about this general boss fight concept. On the one hand, I think these boss fights turned out to be rather creative, and it truly felt like I was using the elements, and Sokka's boomerang for the matter, to overcome a huge hurdle. But on the other hand, I just like brawling it out against a boss with nothing but the attacks I got at my disposal. It's what made me enjoy the boss fights in the Burning Earth so much. Just going heart to heart versus a boss, using the button combos or my special to take them down, there's just something so enjoyable about it. In this game, you just never get that feeling. You disrupt the boss's attacks, they go into crybaby mode, in which you can hit them, and then their next cycle starts. There's barely any real one-on-one brawl involved, it's mostly just a disruption. And even if you disregard the issues I got with the general idea, some of the fights are just super whack. The last 2 fights of the game against respectively Azula and Ozai are the most boring ones in the game. Not only are their attacks incredibly basic, and do you only use water in the Ozai fight rather than all 4 of the elements like you in my opinion should in the final fight of the series, they're also just so damn easy to beat. Cutscenes included, these 2 took me 7 minutes and 54 seconds, and I was being a dumbass with the controls for at least half of it. Seriously, one of the most underwhelming closest to a game ever.
You're powerless. Admit it!
And you know what the funniest thing is? Most of these boss fights are directly after a level without visiting the hub first, and if you decide to leave the game mid-boss fight, you'll have to do the entire level again as well. Now, while this would make sense in other games, in this game it's beyond stupid. You see, after every single level the game gives you this completion screen followed by an option to save right after. This save is exactly the problem I have with this shit. Like, what does this save do? You save a game in order to save your progress and come back next time. In this game you save in order to come back next time and having to do the level again anyway. Like, what does this save? Your collected copper stats nobody cares about? Why even have the player save if it resets the level anyway? I left after this level because I went to the beach, only to come back a day later and to my surprise having to redo the entire level for no apparent reason. Like, don't get me wrong here, I still ended up somewhat enjoying the boss fights. I'd give it like a 6.5 out of 10 if I had to grade it. It's just, the general idea of disrupting the attacks with the elements is very cool, but the aforementioned issues just gave me a headache at times and could have easily been avoided. A functional save option and an actual fight after the disruption aren't anything revolutionary to develop and would have made these my favorite fights of all 3 of the games, without a doubt. But instead I'm just left with very mixed feelings and wondering how cool they really could have been. And that just leaves me with the biggest complaint I have about this game. It's about something that bothered me so much that it mitigates all the other complaints to a certain extent. It's about something that is prevalent in every aspect of the game. It's about something that is on your screen at all times. Do you see it yet? I'm talking about the goddamn pointer. Pretty much everything you do in this game is supposed to be done with this pointer. destroying the environment for money, solving puzzles, fighting enemies. All of it requires you to control and steer the elements with your pointer. It's literally the most blatant Mario Galaxy ripoff I have ever seen. Not only did they steal the game's gimmick by making the pointer the focal point of the game, but Galaxy released around the same time as THQ Studios likely started developing into the Inferno. It literally couldn't be more obvious to me. The people over at THQ Studios probably took note of Mario Galaxy's innovative gameplay and the sheer amount of success it was having, and were probably like, hey, we can do that too. To then develop a pointer mechanic the Mario Galaxy developers would have been fired for on the spot. At its core, a pointer mechanic doesn't have to be a bad thing. Mario Galaxy was developed as a Wii exclusive, which was a perfect system for an idea like this. The motion controls made this idea work out incredibly well, and no matter the task at hand, the pointer never felt difficult to control or came close to feeling like the dominant factor in the gameplay. The feature was just kind of there to add to the gameplay by collecting star bits and feeding the star guys and such. To this day, the execution still feels pretty much flawless. And then there's Avatar Into the Inferno, aka Walmart Mario Galaxy. Avatar Into the Inferno, just like Mario Galaxy, was also developed for the Wii to take advantage of the motion controls, which is perfectly fine. If you're gonna steal someone's homework, doing it on the same system is a pretty safe play. But the thing is, this game was released on 3 systems, not just the Wii. Into the Inferno also got a release on PlayStation 2 and Nintendo DS. We don't talk about the DS version since it's an entirely different game, but the PlayStation version is the exact same as the Wii version. Now, if you've ever played video games before, you know PlayStation 2 doesn't have motion controls. So you got a game that's centered around motion controls on a system without motion controls. What could possibly go wrong? You guessed it. Everything. In this version, the pointer is controlled by the right analog stick. If I've learned anything from gaming with a controller, it's that aiming with an analog stick is incredibly imprecise. You end up overshooting or undershooting whatever you're aiming at every single time. And this game is no exception. You just can't get this damn thing into the right spot. Like, half of my game time was spent steering this fucking pointer into the right spot, and it's just so damn annoying to waste your time like that. This issue especially annoyed me during this timed event. In this scene, Zuko and Sokka are fleeing the Fire Nation jail after freeing Suki and Sokka's dad. You now have to defeat hordes of Fire Nation soldiers before the gondola leaves, or else you fail the mission and you have to try again. The first few waves are fine, but then the invincibility defense soldiers start appearing. Since normal attacks don't hurt them in defense mode, the game wants you to boomerang these landers down with Sokka and use the fire with Zuko to beat them. That's the only way to complete this mission. So, let me paint a picture for you here. You're moving around with your left analog stick while being attacked by enemies. The game now wants you to hold R1 and steer the fire into these enemies. During this time, your movement speed is halved, normal attacks are disabled, and you can't jump, all while being on a timer to hit the enemies with the fire before their attacks reach you, which will make the fire disappear. Do you see what my problem is here? It just doesn't fucking work. Not only is steering a pointer with the right analog stick while moving with the left analog stick a horrible idea that should have been left in the drafts, they also cripple your other moves while attempting to steer this thing. This game should have never, and I repeat,
Never.
gotten a PS2 release. It's literally a ported Wii game. Since I'm playing this on a modded console that's incompatible with the Wii motion controls, I truly got to experience how horrible it must have been for PlayStation users at the time. God, it's so bad. And then I haven't even mentioned the depth issue either. For most of the things you need to do, you need to place your pointer on a specific spot or drag something to a specific spot. But the whole analog stick debacle isn't the only issue with this. This game attempts to operate in a 3D space, which is fine I guess, but with a pointer like this, it becomes a bit of a problem. The thing is, if you push the analog stick upwards, you can only make it do one out of two things. Either the pointer goes upwards or forwards. It can't do both at the same time. The result of that glaring issue is that it's so damn hard to get the pointer into a specific spot. You have to awkwardly move the character and the pointer simultaneously while the pointer gets stuck behind objects for like half of it. This is especially annoying when you're holding an object of some sort, since you'll have to wiggle your character and the pointer until oblivion before the object is finally freed. Especially during fights, this issue is just beyond frustrating. Both when I was attempting to use the puddles of water to beat these dudes in the boat, and when I figured out I had to use an ice block, my pointer just kept getting stuck behind the dock, or it was moving upwards rather than forward, making me get hit by whatever attack they were throwing at me. Attacks that I wasn't able to dodge because of the game crippling any form of movement while holding something with the pointer. At any given time, this pointer does nothing more than significantly hinder the fun experience this game could have been, whether it's the imprecise right analog stick or the depth issues. Look, I've been relatively harsh on this game in the second half of the video, but it was for a good reason. This game just has a bunch of glaring issues that could have easily been avoided. It's not that I dislike this game or that it's objectively really bad, it's just that it leaves me with a bit of an empty feeling. I think this is the most creative game out of all of them. It's the game with the most potential out of all of them. There are so many fun and creative ideas that incorporate more bending than in any of the other games, but I think they just weren't able to iron out the kinks because of the time constraints. I don't think any game developer that has infinite amounts of time would have released this game in just 362 days. Money talks, and I personally think the people behind the series pressured these guys into releasing the game alongside the end of the series to achieve the highest amount of revenue, rather than having them deliver a quality product. But if anything, this should have been a Wii exclusive. Once again, I get that spreading the game over multiple platforms increases revenue, but god, does the PlayStation 2 version fail to deliver the general idea. But yeah, I think that's about all I really have to say about Avatar Into the Inferno and the trilogy in general. Overall, I think the games are actually very enjoyable, but after playing through the trilogy, I'm just left with a money-flavored taste in my mouth. I can't help but think these games could have been amazing with THQ Studios operating without any time constraints. They clearly have the ideas and know how to develop them, but a year per game just isn't enough to develop a quality product. Instead, we got these 5-hour games consisting of a mixed bag of well thought out ideas and mechanics that make me wonder if a child was in control of the development process. It could have been so much better. And I think that just leaves me with ranking the 3 games from worst to best. If you've watched all 3 of my videos on the trilogy, my ranking should be painfully obvious. But I'll still just rank them in this video to avoid any confusion. Coming in hot at number 3 is Avatar: The Last Airbender. While I did have a fun time playing this game, it's not hard to understand why someone would dislike this one. The story has nothing to do with the series, there are far too many boring ass fights, the quests are lame, the stolen equipment system is rather basic, and the many other things this game lacks have earned it a spot at the lowest possible ranking. At number 2, we have Into the Inferno, the game this particular video has revolved around. Had this game been polished out a little more, this would have taken the crown without a doubt. This game has the highest ceiling out of the 3 by a long shot. The focus on the bending, the cool ass puzzles, the creative boss fights, all of this set it up to be a fantastic game. But the game falls short in many other aspects, like the horrible defense mechanism and the focus on using a pointer that doesn't work the way it should. It's really a coulda shoulda woulda story, and sadly that just makes this game fall short of earning that number 1 spot. This means the best game of the trilogy, to me at least, is Avatar: The Burning Earth. This game isn't anything super special. You play through the series story, but told in the form of a game. THQ Studios didn't really take a risk with this one, but what is actually there worked out very well. The areas look great, the fighting is actually a fun experience, both when it comes to the enemies and your own specials and move combos. The fights against any boss feel very rewarding, the prototype drawings and such in the gallery are an incredibly nice touch, and I can't help but love the inclusion of a 1v1 arena. This game doesn't feel as Avatar as Into the Inferno, but it has the least issues of any of the games, and it's not even close. If you're looking to play a game that's related to an excellent series, The Burning Earth is easily my go-to choice. And I think that's where I'll leave it at. I'd like to thank you all for following my journey through this interesting trilogy, and I hope to see you when I take on the next series. Until next time.